And welcome to another ACCELN Hangout. It's another for 2016, a second, and also another for the ACCE 2016 special. G'day, Amanda.
Hello, Roland.
It's a place where we can share our learning and teaching adventures and dream about a future, professional learning adventures, RFID chips, implants, auto cars. Oh, I can't wait, Amanda.
And as you... Hang on one moment. Okay. Sorry for the delay in my response there. I actually had the YouTube channel playing in the background, and it was confusing my brain 2 seconds later. Anyway, so as usual, if you're watching us live, you can post a question to our panel by going to todaysmeet.com/ACCELN, or on Twitter you can use 2 hashtags, ACCE2016 or ACCELN, or if you're already on our YouTube channel, you can comment there, and one day we'll just have one choice and make our lives much easier, I'm sure.
No, we're slowly inching through our way here as Google lays out the path for us with these Hangouts. I'm Roland Gesthuizen, teacher from Victoria, Australia. I still play Minecraft. I roster my kids to do the housework with a game called Chore Wars, a game I learned in Queensland. Thank you, Randy and Lindy. And I'm an Uber nerd and proud of it.
And I'm Amanda Rablin, who can get Roland to say all kinds of things if I write them in our introductory script. I'm an e-learning coordinator from Brisbane and a proud QSite member. And I like to pretend that I can sing and think that I'm funny, but we'll have more on that in our future shows. So let's get started and meet our guests. We're very honoured tonight to have with us the lovely Julie Lindsay, ACCE 2016 Keynote Extraordinaire. Julie, do you want to give us a shout out?
Hi everyone. Hi Roland and Amanda. It's great to be back. Long time since I've done one of these Hangouts with you, and it's great to be part of this and be part of your quirkiness.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. Great to have you back.
We're the spatula that fills in the cracks of the internet, you realise?
I thought that was random cats. Anyway, Martin, you've also joined us this evening. And your microphone is muted, so you'll have to unmute first.
There we go. Yes, I've done that now.
Yay.
Okay, good evening everyone. Good day, Julie. Lovely. I'll sit quietly on the sidelines and just watch and see what happens. So thank you.
We will ask you for your profound comment throughout, though, just because you're on the panel here with us today.
That's right. Every panel has a wide sage that's going to say something that will sum up the extraordinary diversity of Julie's talk with a poignant moment that will counterpoint the rest of everything I'm talking about.
So no pressure, Martin, but that's you tonight. So tonight we continue our ACCE 2016 discussions, and this time we have a focus on global education.
And I've lost my thread here. Hey, I was just going to jump in, Julie. Now, you're keynoting in 2016.
Yes, I've been invited to keynote the ACCE conference in Brisbane, and I'm delighted to be able to do that. So I'll be up there with you, right up in Brisbane, which is only a 2-hour drive from where I live, so I don't even have to get on a plane, which is lovely. Drive my little Suzuki up there and join everybody. So I'm really looking forward to that at the end of September.
So what kind of things will be in store for us in your keynote? Not too many spoilers.
Well, you know, the theme of the conference is if. So really, this just opens a whole sort of Pandora box, doesn't it? You know, you could, if we had more money, if we had more professional learning, if we had better students, or, you know, if all sorts of things that you could think of, if some of them are a little bit irrelevant perhaps, but really, from my point of view, I want to share if we could flatten the world, if we could flatten learning. I was in Beijing a couple of weeks ago. I've just come back from China. I was in China for 2 weeks, and I was in this grade 4 class in Beijing. and the teacher was introducing me, and she said, "You know what, students? Mrs. Lindsay wants to flatten the world." And they're all going, "Ah, what?" And they're looking at me, and they think, you're thinking I've got these big boots. And she said, "Does she look like the sort of person who's going to flatten mountains?" "No." "Does she look like the sort of person who's going to tear down trees?" "No." "Well, what does she mean by flatten the world?" And finally, these grade 4 kids, took them about 5 minutes, and they said, "Oh, does that mean that she wants to make connections with other people around the world?" "Yes." "And does that mean that she's going to use technology to do it?" "Yes." So, from the mouths of grade 4s, this is essentially what I do. I forge connections between teachers, leaders, students, in all parts of the world, and that's where it all starts. That's just the beginning.
Will there be a time that schools grow weary of these connections, that it just becomes a fad, they put it in the same box as the e-portfolios, or is it something that's really refreshing and renewing because it's what we are as people and it's what we're good at doing, and this just is a new way of amplifying it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think we're a long way from being a fad because we're not even doing it properly yet. 99.99% of schools are not flattening their learning at this point. So, in my very short lifetime, I'm not really going to see the peak and then the fadness of it. I don't think. Maybe I will. I'm hoping I will. But yeah, it's good to bring in that human side of what we're doing as well, because technology is not just about the technical side. It is about the building those bridges between people so that we can, as humans, connect and learn how to get on with other people, learn about other cultures, but not just learn about, but learn with. So in terms of it becoming a fad, I'm actually looking forward to that day, and then we'll tackle that question, what to do about a fad that starts to lose its gloss when it actually becomes one, I think.
But I wonder if the connections are deep enough and it's all about learning with. To me, that's something that doesn't really become a fad, it becomes a normality. I think the risk of the fad is kind of in people taking it up and not necessarily doing it well, so not forming those really deep connections, or not looking for that, looking for the learning about another culture and having those token Skyping kind of events. But the real connection, I think, is something that probably, once we get to that becoming commonplace, how exciting for learning.
Yeah, that's right, and this is what I talk about a lot, and I will bring this into the keynote in September as well, the fact that it really needs to become part of the infrastructure. It really is part of our pedagogy, part of our pedagogical approach, which segues in, of course, with my educational doctorate degree that I'm doing at the moment, which I'm about halfway through, where I'm looking at online global collaborative educators and pedagogical change. What is it about online global collaboration that is really supporting this shift, this change in approach to teaching and learning? And of course it's tied in with that infrastructure. If we've got an infrastructure that allows us to be digitally fluent, that allows us to go online, that allows us to create these amazing connections, then of course we can go beyond just learning about. We can make those collaborative situations, those learning environments happen, and go a lot deeper. I mean, the Australian National Curriculum talks about the whole intercultural understanding, and yes, you can get intercultural understanding by learning about, but it's not until you start to learn with that you appreciate the idiosyncrasies and the real beliefs that other people have. And it's when you start working in a team and realise different attitudes, different habits, etc., different local identities that can be brought to the collaborative table, that you realise how valuable an experience this is.
I was going to ask you, some of the teachers who are listening are probably wondering, what does a flat world mean for a classroom?
So, okay, so a flat classroom, and I used to run a lot of things that had the banner flat classroom. I now run things that are called flat connections, which is my preferred term now, but a flat classroom is where you bring the world in and you put yourself out. So it's about a teacher with a group of students not learning in isolation. So it's not about just you and your students. It's about, well, what have you created? What are you thinking? What are you doing? How are you sharing that out to the world? How are you using Web 2.0 tools or social media or whatever else that you have available? And this whole idea of digital scholarship, you know, what is it that you're asking or expecting your students and yourself as a teacher to do in terms of digitally writing and sharing and creating multimedia? So it's flattening that way, where you put yourself out, and then it's flattening so that you're available to bring other ideas and people in. So things like Skype calls, are you able to bring people in real time? Are you able to bring people in asynchronously through collaborative Google Docs, or even commenting on each other's blogs is a form of flattening the learning. So it's really, of course, you know, the flat piece really comes from Tom Friedman. This goes back years ago, of course, when Tom wrote the book The World is Flat, and it's using the technologies that allow us to connect and flatten that whole learning experience. And sometimes I use the word flat interchangeably with connected learning, because I think it helps people to understand it a bit better. So I'm talking largely about, you know, what it means to connect and use those connections profitably for learning.
You made a comment before about how having those connections can lead to changes in pedagogy and how we approach learning. Do you have any examples of that to share with us, so how a teacher's pedagogy has been enriched, how learning has changed in their classroom?
Sure. Well, let me share a couple of examples we just did this trip through China where we visited local schools and international schools, and I'm running this, it's like a global project, but it's a little bit different. I'm running this thing called Connect with China Collaborative at the moment, and what we're trying to do is connect teachers, students, classrooms, leaders, whatever, with people inside China. And it's not just teachers and students, it's actually community groups and anyone who wants to be connected, basically. So while we're in China, we were on one of the fast trains, and we did use an app called WeChat, which is a little bit like WhatsApp, but it's the app that's created in China, and millions of Chinese are using it. Just about every Chinese, I think, is using this app called WeChat, and it's totally accessible to us outside of China, which is the beauty of it, so that we can use that app and connect with people in China. So we were using this app, WeChat, to connect with the classrooms who were in our Connect with China Collaborative. And we were giving them, you know, almost hourly updates. We're on the fast train now. We're heading this way. We're going that way. Here's a picture out the window. We're sharing. So we had this, we've got a teacher in Adelaide at the Wilderness School in Adelaide who said, oh, I'm in class now. I have my Chinese students in class now. We're following the WeChat. We've been working on the voice threads as part of the collaborative, the team voice threads, etc. And I said, right, great, we're going to Skype you. We're going to Skype you now from the fast trains. And she said, oh, okay, so, you know, this is this agility and flexibility in your pedagogy. This is how I view it. So here we are, 5 minutes later, we're Skyping this class of girls at the Wilderness School from the fast train in the north part of Beijing. Of course, this was with my phone, my mobile phone. I'd put a SIM card, a Chinese SIM, in my iPhone. Everywhere in China is a 4G connection. Okay, there was no 3G. I mean, I get 3G here up in the Northern Rivers, which is disappointing to say the least. But with my 4G connection and a selfie stick and my colleague who speaks pretty much fluent Mandarin, we were talking to the locals on the train and hearing the announcements through from the Chinese announcements, and just, you know, immersing that class in this experience. And they were just, wow, what's going on here? So that's, you know, that was perhaps an extreme example because you don't get that every day. But to have that flexibility and that agility and that openness to flatten the learning is really an amazing thing.
So it's possibly difficult to be connected and flat when you've got a really prescribed approach to learning.
Yes, well, if you at 5 minutes' notice can't open up Skype and share your Skype ID. I mean, this teacher and I weren't connected on Skype. We quickly connected, shared it, if you can't do that, then you lose out on those learning opportunities. And I know a lot of teachers in Australia, a lot of teachers in the USA, a lot of teachers in many schools don't have that ability to connect with that tool. There are other tools, of course. We could have done perhaps a WeChat video, but we wouldn't have got the quality. There is a WeChat sort of video-to-video tool that works quite well, but Skype was actually the best tool for that position, and it wasn't blocked in China the day we were there, and it was working. The teacher at the Wilderness School was able to grab it. So yeah, it's understanding what you've got at your fingertips.
That would be the technology as well. So you don't need much, just a mobile phone and a selfie stick, and knowing someone's identity online was all that you needed, which is really cool. It's something that would have been so difficult years ago, but now it's incredibly easy just to jump into someone else's life or their classroom.
Well, it is, and this whole virtual tool piece, we're not the only ones doing it. Other people are doing virtual tools from China and all around the world. But then, of course, that's the real-time connection. And then the other part of the pedagogy is the asynchronous connections. How do you build that community, and how do you join learners in that community to continue to learn from each other and share?
That's so true. When I was using IRC back in the early 1990s, we had a couple of connections out of the school for a dial-up connection too. And we were talking to a school in Finland. And what my students found amazing was that we were ready to go home. We said our goodbyes, went home, came back, and they were still there. It was the same day. It was just kind of, we'd gone and slept during their school day, and we had this flip-flop kind of existence. Time zones didn't mean much for us until then, when we had to sort of make those connections across. We began to find these little windows. I think in this side of Australia, early morning is a good time to connect up with colleagues in the States, because you can kind of get that overlap. Some of the scheduling we do in this show is to try and have everyone in Hawaii sort of sitting at night when we're running our Hangouts. Julie, how does a flat world affect us personally when we have to work in that kind of environment of synchrony with someone who's living in a different time and place?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I think a lot of people are scared of time zones, but it's just using tools like timeanddate.com to work out the difference, etc. But I think for me personally, working across time zones means that I work at all different hours of the day. I was in a call late last week. I was asked to come into a conference at midnight, so it was midnight my time. I did an interview on US radio about 6 weeks ago. It was 3 a.m. in the morning my time. So, I'm a little bit crazy perhaps from that point of view, but I think once again the whole concept of time and motion and when you work and when you don't work needs to be a lot more fluid these days. And that doesn't mean I don't fit in family time. It doesn't mean I don't fit in time for myself. It just means that I have a more open approach to, okay, you want to talk to me? Yes, I think this is going to be a valuable talking experience. I will get up and do this at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I make those decisions. And I think, I still hear of, I'm talking about a situation in the States I heard about again recently, where teachers refuse to do anything extra in the evening. They refuse to make connections or do anything extra in the evening because their district has, isn't supporting them in some way. But so, I don't know where that's coming from, because as educators we always do things in the evening, and we'd go on outdoor education and spend a whole week with groups of students, because that's what we do over here in Australia at least. So that once again, that whole fluidity fluidity and flexibility when you're talking time zones, when you're talking different working hours of the day, etc. It just needs to loosen up a bit so you can be part of different things.
So all of those structures, we just let them go. Sorry, that was meant to be a poor Frozen segue.
Well, you know, it's really a personal thing as much as anything else. Now, I work at Charles Sturt University. I do work for them now in an ongoing capacity at the moment, and I'm talking to different people at the university. Some of my supervisors say you should not be working at the weekend. I don't want to see an email from you at the weekend. That's your family time, your private time. And yet, luckily, my immediate boss, he emails me when he feels like it, and I email him when I feel like it, and we get on really well. And I think that's, you know, it doesn't mean we have to answer each other's emails, but if you happen to be, you know, thinking about work on a Saturday afternoon, you want to send an email, I think you should be able to do that. And I think this is the all part of the flat world learning. And students, and this, you know, gets me onto this whole idea of a flat student. You know, learning doesn't stop when they leave the classroom. So if we give students homework, part of their homework could be to connect with other people in the world, to build things with other people in the world. And if it's, you know, 8 o'clock on the East Coast Australia, and then of course, you know, it's 8 o'clock at night, it's during the day in Europe, or it's very early in the morning over in the States, of course, but you know, asking students to look beyond the four walls of the classroom. Actually, I think that's a greater challenge sometimes than asking teachers, because students are not used to looking beyond. They're used to looking at their teacher, they're used to looking at their immediate tools, and they're used to being conscientious learners within the confines or the context of the school situation. But to learn virtually, and I'm talking about K-12 and university students, to learn virtually and understand time zones and different ways to connect at different times of the day, we're still in the early days of this.
That's interesting. So what you've given here is a set of 21st century skills that the students need to try and succeed in the new flat world.
And how do you prepare them for
Yes,
that kind of situation?
Well, you open up your schools and allow mobile technology in the classroom. You allow a more open approach to the use of different tools, and you support that by very open conversations about what it means to be a global digital citizen, and personal branding and the use of social media. And you know, some schools are doing it. Some schools are really moving forward with this. Some teachers know how to work within the system, and I'm not saying, you know, we all need to be breaking the rules, because we do need to work within systems. But what I'm seeing in Australia, in some cases, is teachers get very frustrated. They get very, oh, it's blocked, I can't be bothered, I'm not even going to talk to my IT people because I really don't know what I'm asking for, and therefore they don't move forward with this. They have great ideas, they want to be part of global learning, and they don't move forward because things don't go their way. But the astute teachers now, of course, are talking to their heads of schools, they're talking to their IT people, and they're having things unblocked because they're able to put up a good case. Now, it's unfortunate that teachers need to go and do, you know, personal pleas, or perhaps, you know, group pleas within the school, but at least it's starting to move things so that connections can be made.
So for teachers who really like the idea of collaborating globally, what advice would you give them, some top tips, or how to persist if it doesn't work straight away or wasn't quite as they planned?
Yeah, that's a good question, Amanda. Persevere, I think. No, the best is you need to find like-minded people, and that comes through your personal learning network. I mean, like ACCE and other organisations. Find people who you know you can work with and make connections. I mean, even within the same country, I mean, we're a pretty big country. You can do global collaboration from one state to the next. It's the same habits, attitudes, and skills and tools. So it's okay to practice within the same country. Find like-minded people, set up a timeline, and plan, but then be aware that serendipitous learning happens and you might not need to deviate from the plan. So I think things don't go right, in my experience, with global collaboration when people aren't following a timeline or aren't able to agree on a timeline or forgot they had a 2-week holiday in the middle of it and didn't really communicate that. So it's really, communication is really important to be able to get from one end to the other of a global collaboration.
I remember someone saying to me that these PLNs, how could they be real? They're not real friends. Real friends are people that you have a cup of tea with or a beer with. How could you call someone that you might chit and tweet and pen a few words, someone tangibly changing the way that you're teaching and your pedagogy? It's been difficult to try and explain that because it's one of those things I guess you have to involve and immerse yourself in. How do you go about approaching that, Julie?
I suppose I've been doing it so long. I think, you know, a lot of people say, and I do agree with them. Once you've got a virtual friend, it is really great to meet in person and cement that relationship in some way. But for many of us, it's, you know, really difficult to meet in person. I've got a lot of online friends who I've never met face to face. And I haven't even been in video conferences with them. So I think, you know, the point is, and sometimes you are a different person when you're online to what you are face to face, and that's a reality as well. You know, sometimes you put on a different persona, and you're a different person when you're face to face. So that's sometimes a bit of a shock to people as well. But once again, it's all part of being a 21st century learner, or whatever, a modern learner. I tend to use the word modern learning these days rather than 21st century. But you know, don't. My message would be, don't let that stop you from developing virtual relationships and friends and colleagues, really, professional colleagues. It's a really important thing to do.
That's important, and I guess we shouldn't be dismissive of teachers who are exploring that or bringing that into the classroom. I remember a large workshop I was at. It's happened long enough ago I can get away with saying this, and there was a quote up on the screen, and I noticed an author, and I thought, just a whimsy, I wonder if this person got a Twitter address, because I taken a photo of the screen. So I tweeted out, we're at this conference and we've used a quote from your wonderful paper here, and just thought you'd like to know that. Anyway, a few minutes later, I got a response and said, oh, that old thing, I've written better stuff since that. Here, check this one out. And she threw me another link, and then another link. And I was poring over this material here, and then one of the workshop facilitators came around and said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm just having a bit of a discussion here. Oh, well, can you stop wasting time? Well, I've actually, I'm talking to the author. Well, tell her that's not what we're doing. We're focusing on this here, and you're getting off track here.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, which brings me to the point that this is also what they call disruptive technology, isn't it?
Yes. Disruptive technology is meant to make you think about what you're really doing, and it's meant to perhaps upset certain people. I ran a workshop in Adelaide recently, with a student workshop, and we were using Twitter, and a lot of the students, it was the first time they'd used Twitter. One girl, though, she'd been using Twitter for a while. She was fairly fluent with it. But I gave them some hashtags, and we were tweeting out, trying to connect with people around the world, and something about what theme. I think they chose their global issue. They were trying to find information about global issues. But this girl connected with a woman, a teacher. It was morning Adelaide time, so there was a teacher in the USA who connected with her, and they had this conversation, this Twitter conversation, and the other students are going, who are you talking to? Who is that woman? And this girl, she got resources from this woman. She built up a temporary sort of alignment on the same wavelength. And this is a 14-year-old girl who hadn't really experienced that before, and she was going, "Wow, this is great." Meanwhile, I had another girl up the back whose mother messaged her on her mobile phone saying, "I see you've just joined Twitter. I don't think this is a good idea." So I was trying to deal with that as well, in terms of, well, it's okay, Twitter's fine, we can talk to your mother later. Just keep going. So yes, it's different situations, but just disrupting that expectation of, well, learning is this and it's more confined. But no, learning is not confined. Learning should be disruptive, and yes, we should have our mobile phones in class, and we should be able to take pictures and tweet them and do it within an environment that is protected by the teacher monitoring. And there's a lot of self-moderation amongst the students that happens there as well.
And I like that with your story, there's a lot of the idea of connecting to a real person, which sometimes you look at these technologies and you think just for distraction, random things. It's just getting news about the Kardashians and things like that. When you make those connections and get that depth, it's really powerful. And sometimes you get to meet these people in real life. Like the first time I met you, I love meeting people that I've only ever seen online in real life. It's such a buzz, and I think sometimes you often know a little bit more or something unusual about that person that may not be in the everyday landscape that person is giving out, but you've got that extra kind of special connection as well, whether you've solved a problem or commented about an issue that you're both passionate about. It's quite amazing.
It is, and this is the experience we want our students to have as well. Now, I'm not talking about the little ones, but the middle school, high school students, let's give them that experience. Let's help them develop their personal learning network. Let's find professional learning communities for them to join at the high school level, and let's build this while they're still in a protected cocoon environment. Schools do need to be cocoons to an extent, but why wait until they get to university where they still don't know how to learn online, unfortunately, and then why wait until we spit them out as educators into our schooling system and still don't know how to learn online, a lot of them. So, there's a whole pathway there that we can start at a very young age. It's 13 or 14 years old. Let's build it.
So I have a question from the floor. Why not in the early years?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, well, there's no reason not to. I mean, I run global projects from kindergarten upwards, and the kindergarten project I'm running at the moment actually is the theme that they've adopted, which is a little different to what we normally do. It's normally about building bridges, but now they've adopted this making a difference, which is great. So they're connecting. We've got about 4 countries joining together, making a difference. And so I think with the really young ones, it's a little more difficult for them to be involved directly one-on-one. But certainly, another project I run from grade 3 upwards, students are one-on-one. Yes, they are building those relationships, absolutely. So, I do see that working. I do find teachers become a little bit more protective of the upper primary school level students. There are certain tools that you wouldn't use, and others, like Edmodo is a good tool to use because it is more behind a wall, and you're able to manage that. So it's really about facilitation of the learning also. And then you hope that, of course, at the high school level, even though it is facilitated to an extent, you know that they can also go off in tangents and do other things. And you hope and plan, of course, not just hope, but plan for the fact that they are good digital citizens by then and know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting reflection there, because you've got going from more of the class-based communication through to a scaffolded environment where students can connect one-on-one, but they're safe, and then helping them become more independent online learners having their own connections. And if these people make it all the way through the university cycle and end up as teachers with a PLN when they start, how amazing is that?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And it should be, you know, it should be the students bringing the resources into the classroom. It shouldn't be just the teacher providing the content and the community connections. And this is something I'm trying to push, particularly with the Connect with China collaborative. You know, we have community groups, NGOs involved, and we shouldn't have to provide all of those. The students should be able to say, hey, I've just connected with a climate change group, and let's bring them in, let's talk to them. So, and give the students that responsibility to do that.
Now, Julie, you're very passionate about this. Is it,
No.
is it an imperative? I mean, do you really believe that this has got more potential to build resilient students who are well adapted to lead the use of this technology for building a better world?
Yeah, it's an absolute imperative. I mean, in many respects, we just give lip service to the, you know, we want students to be globally minded, global awareness, globally competent. Well, what does that mean? Globally competent to me means that they know how to use the technologies, they know how to connect and communicate and collaborate and co-create with other people at a distance. And they will most likely do that in their future jobs anyway. I mean, a lot more of us now are working from home or travelling and working from hotel rooms in all sorts of different virtual situations. And, you know, it's not always now about going to the same place every day, sitting at a desk, or, you know, seeing the same people. Things are shifting and moving. And, you know, I think providing those learning experiences, the imperative is that every level of education should have a global experience, at least one. So if we started at kindergarten and we built up all the way through, so there was at least one, not just a Skype call, but at least one extended global learning experience where the students got to connect and work with other students and other people in the community virtually, and perhaps face-to-face as well. Imagine how fluent they would be by the time they left high school. And how, you know, if they connected with China, if they connected with India, if they connected with the USA, and they started to understand, you know, rural versus urban, climate change versus, you know, other global issues that have gone out of my head at the moment. But just imagine if they said, yeah, when I worked with my friends in China in grade 8, I got a deeper meaning of, you know, the whole kids walking around with the climate weather app on their phone, which determined whether they could go out to play or not, determined whether they actually went to school or not, because the Chinese government have now brought in this law: if the air pollution is too high, you don't go to school. So, you know, perceiving that for many of us in Australia who don't live in cities, of course, you know, what do you mean pollution? You know, I live by the beach. There's not much pollution here, but to have someone, you know, connected to hear that, see it, and discuss it is just a, you know, it's a great experience. So it's imperative we make these connections.
And someone same age group as well. Often if it's, you know, said by a teacher or you're connecting to an expert, it doesn't seem to have the meaning of connecting with someone in the same kind of age group and peer group, same kind of struggles that you're facing. And yeah, you take it in a bit more, don't you? You have that connection, that meaning that you don't get from reading a textbook, watching an app or a video or that kind of thing. Very powerful.
No, absolutely, it is powerful, and learning is beyond the textbook. That's something I say a lot too. Learning is way beyond the textbook these days, and you know, having those direct connections with people around your age group. I know we had in the Connect with China collaborative, the people who are teachers and community members, etc., we call them learning concierges. So we had a friend of mine, actually, Harry, who's an 18-year-old learning concierge who'd been living in Beijing for about 8 years. And he graduated from the Western Academy Beijing, and he was staying on to study Chinese at the local university for 6 months. He's now in Brisbane, actually, studying Brisbane up there. But anyway, he was our learning concierge last semester, and he Skyped in with Emmanuel College in Adelaide. to a grade 7 cohort, and the kids were just blown away. Like, here's this young man who's almost their age, who's actually in Beijing, who can speak Chinese, who knows what it's like to live there. Wow. So it was another one of those moments, those special moments where it was just imperative that everyone gets that opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, we could probably listen to you tell these stories all night, and we'll save that for another hangout, one of those 8-hour ones. Anyway. But I hear you've got an amazing book that is being released very soon that people can pre-order as well, and it features some amazing educators from around the globe. Do you want to give that a plug? There we go, on the screen now.
I've got it here. It's actually available now in Australia.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Hawker Brownlow. It's actually being published by ISTE, and Hawker Brownlow, based in Melbourne, are partners with ISTE, or republish or publish a lot of their books, and they've put it out already. Now ISTE are publishing it in about 2 weeks' time, but here it is. You can order it through Hawker Brownlow. Now, if you go to the globaleducator.net, you will find all of the details, or that URL actually takes you straight to my website. I've got a domain name there, theglobaleducator.net. will get you there. So yeah, this book has been 3 years in the making. Phew, it's almost over. We're just putting together the final touches to the e-book, because the e-book is bigger than this book. If I published everything that was in the e-book in hard copy, it would be twice the size, okay? This is already about 300 pages. And ISTE said, no, you can't do it. So the point of this book is it's actually full of educators' stories. It's got a bit of my story in it as well, but it has 36 case studies. It has about 130 to 150 educators who are telling us what it means to be a global educator, how they lead for global education, online global collaboration, lots of examples of projects and global learning, etc., and this sort of imperative call to action as well. So I encourage people to take a look at it. It's embedded with stories about using technology. So it's really infused with but it's not about the technology. It's actually not about the tools. There's a little bit about which tools to use, but it's really about how the tools have built that bridge for learners across the world.
I like that. That sounds like the kind of leadership and behavioural changes that we need to start thinking about if we're going to have successful team building and collaboration that adds value to what we're doing in schools.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole section there on leadership and how to support, not just be a leader of a school who supports global learning, but as part of that, to support the teacher in the classroom who wants to build these bridges. And so often those teachers don't get support. So it's understanding what that looks like, understanding what a teacherpreneur looks like, an outlier, and how to support that as well.
So tell us a little bit more about this teacherpreneur word that you've just mentioned.
Okay, so the term teacherpreneur, and it's not an original term, of course. There's a little bit about it in the book, the evolution of the word. But it's a combination of teacher and entrepreneur. So it's teachers who find profitable, in inverted commas, learning experiences for their students. So they go out, they put themselves out there, virtually or physically, and find situations and opportunities for their students that are beyond what is perhaps normally expected in the classroom now. So definitely beyond the textbook, definitely beyond the walls of their classroom. So there, I also use the word outlier, and who are perhaps even more extreme, who are out there forging new pedagogies, doing different things, often without the permission of their head of school, often without the knowledge of their head of school or their immediate supervisors, but at the same time understanding how to be flexible enough so that it actually does, the things they want to do embed into the curriculum, and there is still that pattern of, designing learning, being able to assess the learning, and being able to progress the students without being so radical that what we would call sort of an expectation for learning and assessment, it doesn't come to a halt, if that makes sense.
Finding some way to balance the change to get to a more flat kind of situation, I guess. Yeah?
That's right, yes. And I think probably the most important thing I usually say about teacherpreneurs and outliers is that they are people who don't normally take no for an answer. So if you're one of those people who don't normally take no for an answer, then that's probably what you are. I know in the situations that I was in when I worked in different countries as IT director and e-learning coordinator and working with IT departments who wanted to lock things down, I was often in situations where I would just not say no. Just not, don't allow it. Don't say no to me. This is what we want to see happening.
No, we don't never take no for an answer. As a student said to me, "What are you worried about, sir?" I said, "It's not what you don't know, it's what I don't know that you don't know." I think this is probably a good moment to ask perhaps Martin if he's ready for his profound statement.
I have a profound statement, really.
Yes, you do.
Well, I've been listening to everything that Julie says, and like normal, you're just amazed at what she's done, and the views that she holds, and the ideas that she has, which I'm always in admiration of, Julie. And it's lovely to see you proselytizing and spreading the word as you do. To me, I've been involved in this, and Roland mentioned, I think it was 15, 20 years ago, Roland, that you talked about iOS, I think it was. Was that the thing that you were talking about, where you were involved with overseas students?
That's right.
IRC.
Yeah, IRC, there you go.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, I can remember in 1981, I think it was, on the other end of a 300 baud modem talking through a satellite called Dialogue on the Australaston project, and having my kids trying to, or their perception change. This is a small regional town, Mount Gambier in South Australia, and having their perception changed of what it was like to live in Alaska, because their idea was that people were out killing polar bears every day, and I'm sure the Alaskans thought that we were out killing kangaroos every day. But I'm just reminded of that idea of travel broadening the mind, and I'd see what Julie's doing as an extension of that inevitable process, whereby, if you remember what it was like maybe several years ago, I probably remember back a little bit further than you guys, but when I left school in 1968, a number of my friends went to England, went to London. It was called going home in those days. And they flew there, or they took a boat. And I could never afford to do that, because the cost of the air travel was probably 3 or 4 times my father's annual income. I had some very rich friends. But nowadays, my daughter, I think, is on her 13th gap year at the moment, and she just spends most of her time travelling the world. And she does a number of other things. She's a novelist and a whole bunch of other things. I'm very proud of what she's done. But her life is quite different to the life that I'd have had at her age. And I can just see what Julia's proselytizing is an extension of that travel broadening the mind to the democratization of travel. And in a lot of instances, we don't need to travel now, because we've got things like Google Cardboard and those lovely tours that they do and all the rest of the stuff. But we're still human, and we are agonistic animals, and we need to make contact with other people. And in making that contact, we not only gain a better insight into who we are, but we also possibly prepare the kids for dealing with problems that are truly global. And Julie has already mentioned climate change and the problems that are associated with that. But we have other problems that relate to a true sort of xenophobia. And the reason why we have that xenophobia is because we don't know the other people at the other end of the newspaper who are doing all these disastrous things. And because we don't know them, we fear them. And that fear drives irrational behaviour. And the sort of things that Julie is doing and the sort of thing that teachers are doing in this is making people more aware of who they are and getting them to have a better understanding of where they sit within this increasingly democratised world and what part they can play in that. And I think that despite all the other things that people talk about, whereby they'll say things like students need a real audience for their work and this provides a real audience, all those things are true. But the really important part of this, in my way of thinking, is that we are leading more and more towards the democratisation of the world. And the internet plays a very, very big part in that. If you look at the way that only recently the internet was, or the control of the internet was wrested from the Chamber of Commerce, or the Department of Commerce, I'm sorry, in the US. And if you look at the organisational body for the internet, ICANN, ICANN, you see probably the closest that you will get towards a democratic organisation to try to solve the problems related to a true international venture or enterprise. They deal with things like, why has everything got to end in .com? We don't use a Latin alphabet, we use a Cyrillic alphabet, or we use a Chinese alphabet, or we use a whatever alphabet, and therefore we should be able to have our own domain names, which is fair enough. But that, of course, involves changing, to get a bit techie, from a single byte to a double byte character, so that we can accommodate all those additional characters in those non-Latin alphabets. And that is a real issue, trying to stop individuals or individual governments from taking control of this. All requires a democratic approach, and that democratic approach is something that is developed, I think, in the sorts of things that Julie's dealing with. So it takes me hat off to you, Julie. I think what you're doing, or what you're proselytising, is wonderful, and I cheer all the other teachers who are taking that same road, and hopefully they are not constrained or confined by their curriculum, but they find ways around those constraints. And the wonder that you see on kids' faces when they get to see those sorts of interactions and a part of those interactions is just wonderful. So was that profound enough?
Yes, Martin, that was very profound, and it makes me reflect on just our sense of humanity. People still need people, and that's the essence of learning. Technology or not, technology makes incredible possibilities that weren't possible in the past, or were only possible via text-based dial-up conversation, which is still able to form real relationships. Yeah, I think that was really well done. We'll keep you on as our profound panelist.
We almost need to cue Barbara Streisand at this point in time. I think people.
I couldn't find it in my playlist. I'm not confident with my voice today.
Let it go. Let it go. Julie, I was wondering if you'd like some closing thoughts.
Well, thank you to Martin for your revelation in thought there, in terms of support, basically, and I think a lot of what I'm talking about is really trying to shake people out of our apathy, and I think we do need to look at how we can democratise or flatten the learning in so many different ways. There's not just one way to do it, but it does involve the use of technology. So we've got to, there's some hurdles to jump over. Get your technology sorted out. Allow students to use technology in schools for learning, and beyond, and then look at the pedagogy, look at the design, the learning design, and the pedagogy, and then you're just about there, really.
And I think one extra thing, Julie, you mentioned this idea of distraction and how people think that technology is a distraction. I think we need to redefine what a distraction is. I really do, because I think that what a lot of people perceive as a distraction is really just a learning element.
Yes. Well, I consider a boring teacher a distraction too, so it's a distraction to my learning. So
that's a good point, Martin, because
lovely.
There's some agendas
I'm going
there.
to use that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. It's about control, isn't it? About flow, direction. We're not asking teachers to give up the classroom imperative for learning and challenging. For me, the flattening, Julie, it isn't about just more meetings or something else to do. It's about more opportunities to challenge the narrative that we're having in the classroom, exposing conflict. I think that's actually important because that challenges the kind of behavioural things that might come out, and also I think incubating new ideas. It threatens to and it really does. It threatens to disrupt our stagnation and complacency. And if that's disruptive, I don't think that's a bad thing, because when you understand that, then you're ready to grow.
Yeah, and it's being open to those new ideas as well. It's being open to having that influence, and not just. A lot of people approach this with, oh, okay, well, yeah, we're going to connect with the world. This is what we do. Look at us, and they're still not open to actually putting themselves out there to, maybe they're not the best. Maybe they're not, Anyway, there's a lot more we could say about that.
And that's what we'll come to Brisbane to hear, because you haven't given away your secrets, and I'll be fascinated to hear you. So looking forward, Julie.
Okay, thanks so much.
We can work on our hyper-connected fluidity and breaking down those assumptions when we next meet.
That's right, if we could.
Now we will have another guest on our next show, and it will be focusing again on ACCE 2016. It should be in about 2 weeks' time or so, and you can add yourself on Google Plus to the ACCELN community, and like the ACCE 2016 page on Facebook, and follow our tweets to stay connected to all of that as well. And if you'd like to join our panel or have suggestions for future shows, please let us know. And remember, you can view our past Hangout recordings on our ACCELN YouTube channel or at acceln.wikispaces.com. But we haven't updated that for a while. We should get onto that too.
That's right. We're having so much fun with all these recordings that some of the housekeeping just doesn't get overlooked. But we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye, guys.